Hi, Jean.
Hello, hi Diane.
Just waiting for Emma Shea to join. How are you?
I'm okay. Are you okay? Were you poorly?
I'm on the mend. I'm on the mend, thank you. Although I sound a lot worse than I actually am now. I haven't actually spoken in a while. I
Oh,
just heard myself there. Yeah, I will just check how Emma Shea's getting on. I know sometimes Facebook bumps you out the room.
yeah, I haven't used it before actually.
No, I'm glad you got in easily the first time, which is good, isn't it? I think sometimes it really depends what you click on or what time you click on it. It seems to be a
Right.
little bit hit and miss sometimes.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's the joys, isn't it? The joys of virtual live events. That's the fun
Yeah.
of it. Just check in. There we are. I think she'll be able to access it now.
Oh, good. So do people just pop up, as and when? Just they join if they want to?
Yes. Oh, here's Emma Shane. I'll just let her in. Yeah, so people can just leave messages for yourselves. It will come up on the right-hand side of the screen. You'll
Oh,
be able to see
okay.
comments there. So
Right.
if anyone has any live questions, they can ask. But we aim to kind of just keep it around half an hour. So obviously you can go through questions between yourselves, and we can
Okay.
keep an eye on the chat and the comments and give you a shout. But yeah,
Okay.
I won't hold you up any longer. I'll go and hide in the background now.
Okay. We'll just chat then and see what happens.
Yeah. Thanks, both.
Thanks, Diane. Hi, Jean.
Hi, nice to see you in sort of
Nice
virtual
to
real
see
life.
you. Yeah, in our little box.
Yeah,
In our little
yeah.
box. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we have some questions coming through.
Frozen.
Oh, you've frozen. Could be my internet being a little bit temperamental. Can you still hear me? Oh, what's happened here?
Oh, it does look like Jean's frozen there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Um, Jean, if you can hear us, it might be worth leaving the room and trying to come back in. That normally works best. I wonder if I don't think I have any power, do I? Oh, maybe.
Maybe she has left because that's her little icon, I think.
Yeah.
I was just thinking by way of introduction, just to fill the space while we wait for Jean to come back. I would describe Jean as like the Yoda character in terms of her expertise on digital learning, and I'm very much the Luke Skywalker. So I'm quite a novice. I'm keen but inexperienced. Whereas I think, we do have to recognise Jean is the expert here.
Oh,
Jean, I was just comparing you to Yoda in the nicest possible way.
oh my goodness.
in that in that you really are a digital expert. Your knowledge is so impressive. So I'm
Oh my
the
goodness.
little Luke Skywalker character, learning from your expertise.
That's amazing. Because I feel like I'm very much just having a go and learning as I go along, and learning from my colleagues, particularly because they are, I work with some really accomplished people in digital technology. So it's kind of given me a way in to think, well, how could we apply that to art, which has been really interesting over the last few years.
Yeah, because you shared some excellent resources on the Facebook page. Your Padlets are legendary. They're so helpful to have that really tangible, accessible resource that people can get to grips with.
Yeah, I do love Padlet. I think Padlet is a really great way of communicating with other teachers because it's so user friendly and it kind of looks so visually attractive. So I'm really lucky that I've got university account, so I can have an infinite number of Padlets.
Yeah, I also love it. And I think as art educators, it's a way of curating, isn't it? So it's quite
Oh yeah,
fulfilling to put together little collections that not
oh
only are
definitely.
useful, but can also look nice and be shared with others as
I
well.
know. Yes, absolutely. And I think, I think it's got potential to be used as a school art gallery, because, I think you could use photos and video and make that the main feature of it. And, I think that could be very powerful for sharing with parents, perhaps.
Yeah. Do you know of
So,
schools that use Padlet much? Because I had this question
I
from my
think,
students and I said, I'm not quite sure.
yeah, I think some do, but I think to use it really effectively, the school needs to buy into the main account so that their staff can have as many Padlets as they want. And I think once you do that, you can really use it in so many different ways, both with children and adults and parents. You can embed it on your school website. You can have them closed and private or open. So yeah, and I know as the students I work with, because they're at university, they all get their own top level Padlet account, so they get quite addicted to it over the 3 years. They get quite a collection. So
Yeah. It's a nice, I think it's a nice way to organize content that is quick to flick through. So like unlike a normal file where you just get titles, it's and there's so
yeah,
many different possibilities, aren't there? I love the one with the map. You can have the interactive map and you can
oh
zoom into
yes,
different locations. So that's wonderful for
yes, that's really.
cross-curricular link.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and we get students to use it to make assignments when they are going to be quite visual, or kind of more creative assignments where they're perhaps going to make different things, and just trying to submit it on paper wouldn't just be the right channel. So yeah, I've seen some really creative uses of it by students. And I think the live aspect of it is nice too. If you're using it with students or with pupils, you and the other people using it can see things appear in the moment, which can be
Yeah.
quite good.
Yeah, and that's right. If someone takes a photograph of something, you can zoom right in and see detail. Whereas if it was someone's work in the classroom, you'd
Yeah.
have to physically like hold it up to your nose to, which isn't
No.
practical. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think actually, especially when you're maybe thinking about wanting to give children access to a set of images and perhaps not have to try and organise a safe search, you can make your own collection of images, maybe like 20 or 30 images that children can then browse through and make choices from, so that you've got some control over what they're choosing from before you launch them off into
Yeah,
making their own choices.
yeah, that's a really good suggestion. So to use it as a vehicle for sharing artworks in a kind of appropriate way, because we know how much stuff is on the internet that we don't want children to be looking at.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I know that
Yeah.
ultimately they have got to learn to make good choices, but I
Yeah,
think we
on
need to
that note,
scaffold that. Yeah.
yeah. So connected to that, Jean, moving away from Padlet, but thinking about arts and culture. I know you're a fan of Google Arts and Culture, and I also use that with
Yeah.
my students. I've said to
Oh
them,
yeah.
that Google say it's for age 12 plus. What are your thoughts
Mm.
on, because of course there's so much to interact with on Google Arts and Culture. I mean, it's an education itself. You could just spend forever on
Yes.
there. What are your
Yeah.
recommendations to teachers to how they might use it in the classroom with children?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, isn't it? The kind of age limit, and I wonder. I mean, when we've considered that with students, we've talked about how that's maybe like the child's independent use of it, their kind of free reign. But as teachers, we might pick out certain parts that we know are acceptable to use with the age group we want to use it with, and we kind of mediate the use of that particular part of it. I think, because there's a lot of good things out there that we can see potential for, but we have to kind of take into consideration the child's age and in what circumstances they're using it.
And also we know with digital, don't we, that it's so easy to kind of go off piste when you're
Yes,
just playing around and to accidentally stumble on something inappropriate or potentially upsetting for children as well.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Well, we had a talk from some various different people at Computing at School last week, and they were talking about how you can now set certain things on an iPad so that a child can only look at that thing or the one thing you've chosen, and they can't move away from it. So I guess that's a good strategy. I think one of the challenges is that when we talk about digital technology in school, there's such a wide range of different ways of accessing all the different tools, you know, from the school who every child has got an iPad to the, you know, you're completely shared and you get one go maybe once a week or once a half term. You know, my students all work in schools, and the different ways they describe their school organises access to digital technology is it's just such a huge range. It's a challenge in itself, really, to be prepared for all those different scenarios.
Yeah, because it's very easy to think if only I had X, Y, Z, but it's a case of making the most of what you've got. Is what can I do? What can I do with what
Absolutely.
I've got? And you can do a lot with not much, actually, if you know where to go.
Oh, absolutely. I think, and I think also when you're starting out, to start small and manageable, so that you're starting with the areas that you feel confident with, and then you implement them and try and kind of build on them bit by bit, because the whole thing can feel very overwhelming. But I think you've got to kind of start with what you've got and what you feel confident with, and gradually kind of look outwards to see what your colleagues and what other people are doing that you can make use of.
Yeah, I give that same advice in the same way. If you look at progression in kind of digital skills with the younger children, it's about a playful approach, just experimenting, that you take the same with children who maybe haven't had experience, and if you're newer to it yourself, because I know there are so many tutorials online, but personally I find literally hands-on, heuristic, just what does it do, it's not only fun but also really educational as an approach. So teachers kind of do that themselves, don't they?
It kind of reminds you of what children are encountering all of the time, doesn't it? Which is not a bad thing to experience regularly. And I suppose also we get this kind of sense that children are often quite brave in experimenting with digital technology, because you can undo it or remake it or go back to the beginning or start again. It's you don't have that sense of, this is the only painting I've done and I like it now, and what if I change it, and what if I've only got 5 minutes left, and you know, there's all sorts of things that are a challenge in the real world that you might be able to approach differently in the digital world. But I would definitely, I mean, the way I came into this was that working with Rebecca Heaton and Helen Caldwell, that we would try to find ways of combining physical art and using digital techniques together. So although we do often talk about making art that only exists in the digital world, a lot of what we talk about is, well, you know, how can you combine it with drawing or painting or pattern making or you know, that or kind of capturing what's happening.
Yeah, that's so true, using it as a tool. So in the same way in the old days we might have taken children's work to a photocopier and then they worked on, you know, an enlargement or something, they can produce something and take a photograph and then play around with changing things, can't they, or in a digital sense. So it is both, that versatility, it is both a sort of discrete area of learning in that you can create digital art that is digital art, but it's also such a great tool, isn't it, for recording ideas, for recording process, for responding. I mean, it kind of crosses the approach that we took to that Susan Ogier and I took to the Oak curriculum was just in the same way we think about drawing across the art curriculum. We need to think about digital technologies as a way of just being so versatile for how we can use them in different ways, as a starting point, as a way of recording, as a moving off and developing new ideas.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think maybe you know, starting with those kind of research and collecting ideas and recording what you've done, starting with that, where most people might feel more confident because they regularly collect ideas through the internet and they regularly take photos and video, and then kind of moving on to the, you know, let's use it to actually make art or you know, kind of use coding. Or I think one of the interesting things is that we can sometimes use it to make a strong connection with the computing curriculum, because sometimes because it's so new. I mean, I as a person who trained as a teacher, that area was completely not part of my teacher training, so I've always had to kind of just catch up and learn what to do as I go. And I think that's the case for lots of people in education at the moment, because of that appearance of the computing curriculum in 2013, after lots of us had finished our training and got our jobs.
Yeah, and that can be a barrier, I think, to teachers, because it's the same can be said of many different things, but if you don't feel so confident, you're less likely to want to use it in your teaching, because you don't want to appear that you don't know what you're talking about. But I guess presenting yourself as a co-learner is a really useful approach. And often, you know, my students have said that they have children in their class that just, you know, they're experts. They have an iPad and they know exactly, they know more than, you know, all these tricks. So it's another valuable opportunity for children, for some children, to share, I know this, I can do this, because there are some digital whizzes who might not be considered good at arts, but it's an opportunity for them to show their knowledge and use that in an artistic way and help their peers.
Oh, definitely. Yes, yeah, and we've worked with schools in the past, primary schools, who would kind of like collect up some of their older pupils, maybe their year 5s and 6s, and have them as like designated digital leaders. So they would be the people who would maybe go and work with younger children and help them out as kind of like developing their own expertise, which is quite interesting. I quite like that idea, that they sort of come round to you and help you out.
Yeah, that's a really nice idea, isn't it? You know, children collaborating with older peers, and because often we know that children explain things in a very different way to an adult, and you know, they can develop nice relationships with children of different ages, and that's a really good approach. Like a digital ambassador.
Exactly, yeah, and so yes, that's quite interesting, I think. And I think one of the most important things perhaps is that we teach children that the devices they've got access to, whatever they are, they're not just these things that you sit in front of and watch passively, but you could harness them to be creative, to make things, to share with other people, and you know, within a kind of safe scenario, you could you know, really change the way you view your device, so that it's you know, much more of a tool for creativity and not so much I'm just going to sit and watch and listen. Although that's good.
And just thinking about how, yes, of course, it's all part of it, isn't it? I'm just thinking, I've got a friend whose daughter wouldn't describe herself as artistic, but she makes great videos with like Minecraft and Lego animations, and it's I think it's messaging to children, you're being creative, that is being artistic, and it's under this massive umbrella of what it means to be an artist, to kind of boost their confidence. That's a valid
I think we're definitely
art.
Yeah, I think I really like the way now in art we tend to see that there's so many different ways which we can create art, and so many ways of mixing different ways of working. And I particularly like art that's created and people experience it and then it disappears, and it exists in your memory, but it's not maybe in a gallery, it's just quite temporary. I think that's quite interesting for children. I think that they were part of this thing and then it was gone.
Yeah, a kind of memorable experience that could be fleeting.
Yeah. I think, and sometimes that's quite useful in school because it's quite hard to store everything. So it's quite good, isn't it, to have a pop-up thing that happens that really explores something and then disappears.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I had a question for you, Jean. I'm sure you've got a great answer. I was just thinking about the overlap between photography, because so much photography these days is digital rather than more traditional forms. The overlap between photography as a discipline and working in digital processes. Do you have any advice for teachers about curriculum coverage and where that is there a grey area, or does it matter there's a grey area? Or
I mean, I think there's all sorts of overlaps, aren't there? I mean, I think when we're maybe using photographs and we're manipulating them and changing them and kind of creating new material with them, that kind of really takes us into the sphere of art. That's something we've often done with students, and students have then gone into school and done it with children, where the children might create a piece of physical art, a collage or a painting or a collection of objects, and then they photograph it and go on then to use apps or tools to manipulate the photos to make new things, which they then maybe take away and recreate maybe in painting or drawing or printmaking. So it's almost like the photo becomes a vehicle for making changes and being creative. But I suppose when you're thinking about photos, you're thinking maybe is it going to be this tool for making more making something creative in art, or do I actually want a really good photo of this physical feature in geography? So I need to get the viewpoint correct and I need to include the whole thing, or video all the way around. So I think maybe being guided by what the photo or the group of photos is going to be used for is really important. Because I think one of the problems I imagine for photographers, it's really frustrating that we're all so used to just going click, click, click and collecting this massive amount of photos and maybe not stopping and thinking, where should I stand, and should I be looking up or looking down?
Those principles.
We're not. It's a bit more, randomly, I will take many photos from which I'll choose one that's okay. When we work with children on campus, we'll often say, you can take lots of photos, but there will come a time when we're going to ask you to reduce your collection to 5 or 3, and they have to be a bit discriminating. And then sometimes when they do that and they look at the ones they've chosen, they'll then go, oh well, actually the 3 I've chosen have got this in common, so maybe that's what I need to be looking for when I'm taking the next photo, to kind of stop them being so indiscriminate.
I guess one of the main differences is that when you're working with learning intentions that have a photography focus, it's thinking like a photographer, thinking about viewpoints, thinking about lighting, thinking about the audience, rather than just the photo being a starting point. So the photo is actually your end point.
Yes, that's absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And sometimes I guess like that whole process of setting something up that you're going to photograph and then taking the just right photograph of it is like the entire sequence of learning. And in my sketchbook circle sketchbook in January, my partner sent me photographs that she'd taken of plasticine and models, but in different lighting conditions, so they looked really dramatic. So my next step was to try and recreate that and do something else with it. It was really interesting that I'm going to create it, but I also want to try and capture it, so that influenced the way I set it up, and that kind of like using materials and taking the images was like really closely connected.
Yeah, that kind of staging, that sort of considering all the different angles. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really interesting. We've done that with children using like little small world toys and creating little worlds and then photographing them from really low down, so you feel like you're in the world. Some really good artists that do that. Is it Picture? Oh, I can't remember the name of the artist who uses tiny figures.
Yes. Yeah. I'm awful with names, but yes, I can see the images in my head. Yeah. And also playing with perspective as well. There's lots of those.
That's right.
There?
Yeah.
Which
that's really good.
There's really nice examples for sharing with children.
Yeah, definitely.
Jean and Elisha, sorry to interrupt there. Just say Facebook's not working properly tonight because you can't see the comments coming up, which normally you'd be able to see.
Oh, okay.
No, so we just have one question, which I thought, we're getting towards the end now. So I thought it might be worth me popping in to say, I know you've touched on it a few times in your various conversations, but just a bit more about the biggest challenge to making digital art in the primary classroom and anything you do to overcome that.
I must be psychic, Diane, because that was going to be my next question to Jean.
What was it? You just
great. Oh, brilliant. Oh my goodness. I think maybe it's like the kind of feeling, we've talked about it a bit, maybe the feeling that we haven't got the right equipment, or we don't know how to use it to make sure it kind of feeds in and supports learning in art. Maybe we kind of see that equipment being used elsewhere, but we haven't quite maybe harnessed it for supporting learning in art yet. Or maybe we just feel like what we've got wouldn't support effective work in art. And I think, we mentioned right at the beginning that I think it's very much a case of looking at what you've got and thinking, okay, well, what can we do with that? So over the time that I've been working with students and pupils in the last few years, we began with several sets of iPads with all sorts of art apps and different things that we could use with our students and take into schools. And we were really very dependent on that way of working. And as you can imagine, over time, those iPads began to work less and less because at every update, apps dropped off. And now we simply can't use them anymore because they're just too old. And at exactly the same time, our university decided that as students started, they would each be given a free laptop, but not an Apple device. So we had to think, okay, so what can we use that's on these laptops that every student has got to feed into our teaching of art? And how can we prepare students going into a classroom that's Apple, or that's Microsoft, or that's Google, or that's bring your own device, or got everything or got nothing? So, I think ultimately you have to take a critical look at what is there and then start small and start with that and build from that point.
Yeah, the hardware. And just adding to that, Jean, thinking about the frustrations of your technology not doing what you want it to. I think that's also a barrier, that I think technology in a different way to real stuff can be quite unpredictable. If something freezes or crashes, then what do you do? And I always say to the students, if you're planning anything with digital tools, digital processes, make sure you've got a backup of some sort, some alternative, because you can never rely on it, can you? Like, we can't see the comments coming through on Facebook because obviously there's some problem there. There's always a problem. I think it's being
exactly.
as a teacher, being open, being a role model for when things go wrong, and thinking inventively about how you might address that rather than breaking into floods of tears because it's all gone pear-shaped.
I know. Yeah, and I think maybe that's, maybe it's a case for kind of thinking, okay, well, we'll do this at some point. We're going to try, and like one group will do it this week and one group will do it next week, and over time we'll all get a go at doing these various things. I guess one of the other things is that it often, digital technology, if you plan it right, it can often lead to children working together and collaborating and kind of working together and having different roles in the group. So, sometimes that can help, that kind of shared and collaborative approach where some people are doing this and some people are doing that, and there's some development of expertise. But yeah, I think you have to be really well prepared and have a sort of positive attitude of, well, we're going to try this and let's hope for the best and be optimistic, but be ready just in case. It's quite interesting actually working with adult students that often I've just taught a module about using digital technology to support learning, and even adult students are really quick to be discouraged if it doesn't work immediately. And obviously when they're all using their own personal devices, it's sometimes hard as a person going around going, well, what does it look like on this one, which is like 3 years old, and what does it look like on that that's no newer than the one I've got? And it's really, you just have to kind of keep plugging away and working together and helping each other out.
Yeah, so in a school environment, you're much more likely to have that uniformity of, what you've got on offer for the children in terms of hardware. But I always say to my trainee teachers that you can't always see what the children are doing in the same way. When they've got physical resources on the table, you can glance around. You have to, in the old days with the ICT suite, everyone, you could kind of see what was going on, but it's a little more secretive, which I suppose might be good for some children, less good for others.
But that's true. And they can kind of go off on a kind of route of their own that you didn't expect sometimes. I think also, I guess, and I guess thinking about how your school just organises and uses digital technology generally across the curriculum and across different age groups, because there's so many different approaches, sometimes it's very much situated with the people who've adopted it and feel enthusiastic about it, and other times it's much more kind of evenly spread out. It very much depends on the individual schools, doesn't it? One of my students was telling me that they do all of their computing and digital technology in one big kind of blowout at the end of the last half term, where they do a really big project and really kind of do it all in one go, which is quite interesting.
Across the whole school?
I think so, yeah. I think they have, kind of like a great big, make a big event of it.
I guess they must have enough hardware, enough devices for everyone to.
Or maybe it's part of a bigger. It could be part of a bigger whole, perhaps. I'm not sure. It's interesting the different ways. Because part of the module I've just been teaching has got some. We did some work on coding, and I was saying, well, where's coding taught in your school? And they're thinking, well, I'm not sure really, and just go and look for it. It's kind of hidden away somewhere in the curriculum.
Yeah, and what we haven't really we've talked about how you might use artworks to inspire children, but if you can get someone into the school who's a digital artist who works with digital to act as a role model and to inspire children, that's obviously going to be a really great plan, because it's someone they can ask questions of, and recognizing that not everyone uses that. I mean, there's such an array of choice and options, but no one uses all of it. They have expertise in little kind of niches and preferred ways of working.
Absolutely, and I guess it's and also that if you're talking to any artist, maybe taking the opportunity to ask how they use it in their art, because sometimes, although you might be a printmaker or a sculptor, behind the scenes perhaps you're using digital technology for aspects of your artwork. Even if your artwork isn't ultimately digital, it's kind of a tool that everyone harnesses in different ways now in their different roles, isn't it? So
Yeah, not least if you're a professional artist, to create your own kind of website and online presence, you know,
yes,
showcasing yourself and your
oh, yeah,
your creation.
that's right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really interesting how even artists, you know, artists who've been working for years have really kind of taken on different aspects of technology and different tools and added it to their repertoire of approaches.
Well, just thinking of like David Hockney and how he transitioned from his physical
Yeah.
painting to his iPad painting, and the whole story around that being quite interesting. And I guess that just
Definitely.
exemplifies how we mustn't, as teachers, put artists in little boxes and say, well, they do this, and because artists work in so many different ways and have different interests over different time periods and this sort of thing.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. It's very easy, isn't it, at school to go, okay, we're going to think about this artist, and then we end up maybe focusing on one distinct aspect, and the children go away thinking the artist is all about this because that's what they were focusing on, when actually there's this big huge area of other things that are important too. It's hard, isn't it, when the curriculum is so packed with things that have to be done.
Yeah, there has to be an element of well, making it manageable, but it's what you include and what you don't include, isn't it, really? But that's where
Absolutely.
the digital technologies offer so much potential for linking things together and researching and sharing and recording, as a sort of glue, really, if we're thinking of them as a tool.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Diane, do we have any more questions?
No more questions here showing up for me. I am a bit worried that Facebook's maybe not showing them. So what I would maybe suggest is, if anyone does have any other questions they want to put, that they write them in the comments and we can check them in the next couple of days. And you know, maybe Jean, our digital Yoda, can go back and
I'll go
check
and
them out.
I'll go back and check, because definitely.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you so much, both.
Oh, yeah.
Have lovely Christmases. I'm sure I'll speak to you before, but I'll put the next couple of live events. We've actually got the next 3 live events planned already, so I'll upload them before Christmas so people can see what we've got coming up.
Great.
Thank you. And lovely to chat with you, Jean.
Yes, and you. It's really nice to talk.
Have a nice evening.
Lovely. Thank you,
Thanks, Diane. Bye-bye.